I find people, they're like, well, I want to do mediation because I want what's fair. Fair is the F word in divorce to me. I would rather somebody swear and use the other F word than say, I want what's fair.
Welcome to The Details with Allison Kahler, a space for real divorce stories and grounded conversations with experts, helping you find clarity and courage as you step into a future that may look different than you expected and better than you thought possible. My guest today is Melissa Farag. Melissa is a California licensed attorney-mediator and the founder of High Vibe Mediation. She's practiced family law for over a decade and is passionate about helping individuals and couples reach amicable resolution in the divorce process through mediation, informed partially by her own experience of divorce. Melissa also hosts the High Vibe Divorce podcast. Let's get into my conversation with Melissa. Welcome to the podcast, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So excited to have you here. Melissa and I met through a mutual friend last year as I was starting to come up with the concept for this podcast, and she was a huge help for me in just thinking through this. Melissa has her own podcast, and happy to share more about that later, but so excited to have you on today to share not only a little bit about your own story with divorce, but also the work you do in the mediation space. I would love to start by just hearing a little bit about your divorce story, and then we can get into how that sort of has shaped your perspectives in the career that you do.
Okay, so I frequently say this, but my divorce is probably the least interesting thing about me. I was married from 2013 we separated in 2018, but due to COVID, we weren't officially divorced until 2020, but we were in California, so that kind of took a longer bit of time. And my partner at the time wanted some additional time to kind of let things settle before we officially filed. And it was really bizarre. I remember I had a court hearing in San Mateo County. I went from a hearing and I went downstairs and filed my own paperwork, which was such a weird experience and very bizarre. But ultimately, I married a very good person. He's a good person. Our marriage definitely wasn't terrible. There was nothing abusive. There was nothing bad. There was nothing, really bad about it. But the thing is that I had changed so much over the years. A huge part of my story has to do with grief. And that's how I started with my podcast, High Vibe Divorce. I talk a lot about spirituality because I've changed so much. I was such a different person in 2013 when I got married. I was in law school. I hadn't really dealt with any death in my life. I hadn't really faced a lot of grief. I had two grandparents that were dying of cancer, and my mom had started getting sick. I got married in between my second and third year of law school, and my mom had a neurological disease and really started going downhill. And she has always been like one of my best friends, like my closest confidant and kind of one of my people. And she was no longer able to talk or really communicate. And I wasn't living at home. And so out of sight, out of mind, she had, dementia as part of her illness. And the grief was immense. I started, and we determined that this was a genetic illness. It was a prion disease. It took a really long time to diagnose. And I was in weekly therapy. We started doing couples counseling. I was really struggling with my whole life falling apart and who I was in the world and how I related to the world. Everything was just totally changing. And so honestly, the person I was when I had met that partner back in 2010 was so different from the person I was in 2014 and 2015, 2016, and then eventually late 2018 when we separated. I was not the same person, and it took me such a long time. And I am such a huge component of mental health care and going to therapy and having an unbiased person that you can speak with that's not a parent or a friend or someone who knows your spouse, that you can just go and just work things through. And we all know ourselves. I need to talk things out to help make sense of things. And so I was heavily grieving, and my mom, it took her 10 years from when she started having symptoms to when she passed. It took her 10 years to pass. She was 45 when she got sick, and she died at 55. We found out it was a genetic illness. So I had a 50% chance of having it myself, which my mom was on hospice for 6 years. And so thinking about, am I going to be a burden to my husband? And he wasn't very comfortable around my mother, who is really ill. And I was thinking, I'm seeing my future self. I mean, it was all really heavy stuff. Am I unhappy? So I was thinking, am I unhappy in my marriage, or am I unhappy because I'm losing my mother? And for the first time in my life, I needed a lot more emotional support than I had ever needed. Yeah. And that was just not how this relationship, my first marriage, it wasn't set for that. Yeah. And so in a lot of ways, I was changing the rules of engagement by needing a lot of different, like my marriage was good enough. Like it was fine. He was a good person, brilliant, very intelligent, wonderful family. We would have had beautiful kids if we chose to have a family, but I was so lost and lonely in that relationship. Yeah. And it took me years of therapy to get to the point when I recognized, you know what? I am not the same person that I was when I entered this. I need to exit. And we did everything outside of court. The only reason I filed in court is we didn't have e-filing yet, and I happened to be at court that day. So I filed in that county. So I filed the paperwork in court, but we never went to court, and we never really had to deal with that. So we just negotiated on our own, really kind of mediated it. I believe at the time my ex's sister was a practicing family law attorney, so she was able to review our paperwork, and it was really straightforward, and we just split what we had, no children. But I definitely knew that there were going to be issues with raising kids, and so I think we didn't have children. And so that's a whole other can of worms that we didn't have to deal with, and made it more straightforward and more simple. But I had also been doing divorce work. So I was a litigator at that time. I've been litigating ever since I graduated law school in 2014 in the family law space. I've wanted to be a family law attorney since I was 13, which is
oh my
so
gosh.
bizarre.
How did you know at 13 that you wanted to do that?
Because it's so weird. I think I honestly feel like it was part of my like sole purpose. If we're going to get into like spirituality, I've always felt really drawn to, I love people. I think people are so interesting, and their stories are so interesting. And you see people going through divorce. It's raw. It's real. Mm-hmm. It is not always pretty. And so you get a chance, as a professional, I get a chance to really see people as they are, support them, help them through a really difficult time. And that's really, really fulfilling for me. Yeah. I would say the only thing I can explain why I was interested in that is that Orange County where I grew up, Orange County, California, has about a 70% divorce rate.
I knew it was higher than like the national average. I didn't know it was that high.
It's like 70%. And there's definitely some repeat offenders that have messed with the statistics that have gotten married and divorced like 5 times. My parents were married until my mom passed away, so almost 35 years. But I saw a lot of people, and I saw how the litigation really impacted my friends that were young teens or even older teens, that their parents were getting divorced, and it really impacted them, their relationship to other people, how they were going to be in relationships. The relationship modeling wasn't there. It was just really fascinating. And I've always known I wanted to be a mediator, and I eventually wanted to work with people to help find resolution, because I just felt like there had to be a better way. But in my mind, I felt like, I was an athlete. I've always learned by doing. I felt like I needed practice in the litigation space before I could really be a good mediator. And that is totally proven to be true, because at the end of the day, look at the stats. 95% of cases in California are going to settle before ever going to trial. Wow. So you're going to settle. So do you want to try and be amicable from the outset and do mediation, which is not going to be the right way to go for everybody, but almost everybody is going to settle. So you're either going to settle through just negotiations with the other party, negotiations and mediation, or you're going to have negotiations through counsel or some mixture of these things, but you're going to settle. And sometimes people settle at the courthouse before the trial even happens. And if you have found yourself in probably any state courthouse. You're going to go in and the judge is going to say, go out in the hallway and try to talk it out. They want you to settle. They're going to push you to settle. And you're going to have settlement conferences. You're going to have trial setting conferences. You're going to have all these things throughout the litigation process to force you into settlement and having conversations with the other side. So the most efficient way to do it is just to go straight to the source, have the conversation at a court, and then litigate whatever you can't settle. And most of the time people are able to settle.
Super helpful. And I'm so excited to dig into everything mediation, because it's something that, as I was going through my own divorce experience, I didn't really know that much about mediation. And we wanted it to be done sort of as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, like as low stress and low drama as possible. But it moved really quickly, and I don't feel like I researched all these options. So I'm just still 7 years later, super curious to learn more about it. But before we go into that, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, because I didn't see stories like yours. And I have a lot of parallels with my own divorce story, in the sense of, I knew people that were my parents' friends who were getting divorced in their 50s or 60s after the kids were off to college, or where something sort of sensationalized had happened. I really just want to normalize that experience in case somebody else is listening and hearing, like, my ex isn't a bad guy. There are things that happen. We grow as individuals through the course of our marriage. And like, sometimes there are reasons that mean that marriage that might have felt right at one time don't end up being the thing that lasts forever. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem.
So let's talk a little bit about what mediation actually is. And maybe if you can start by saying, like, you are an attorney-mediator, which is different than an attorney and is different than a pure mediator. So can you just explain kind of what an attorney-mediator is, and then maybe introduce what is mediation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I frequently explain to people, so I'm an attorney-mediator, which means I am licensed as an attorney in the state of California. But when I am talking to mediating couples, I remind them that I can only wear one hat at a time. While I know the paperwork and I can go to court and I can appear in court, I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I can only wear one hat at a time. I can wear my mediator hat, which is neutral, impartial, unbiased, or I can wear my attorney, zealous advocate hat, and I can only represent one person. We have all these ethical rules that we have to follow. So ethically, I can only represent one person at a time. And as the attorney representative for somebody, I am looking out for their best interest. I am advocating for them. I need to inform them of what the law is, how the law is going to impact them, what the best option is. If there's a better alternative, how to seek that alternative. As a mediator, so when I did my training back in 2020, everybody called dispute resolution alternative dispute resolution, ADR. And now it's dispute resolution, because it's not so alternative. No matter, almost civil courts throughout the country, you have to do some kind of mediation before you can actually settle or end up in a courtroom. So there is going to be some kind of mediation process, and it might be a negotiation with a private judge or a temporary judge, or you might see an actual mediator. You may see a family court services mediator where you're just talking about child custody and visitation, things like that. So depending on your jurisdiction, now we're seeing it's not so alternative anymore. It's very much a normal thing, but people don't always know that these options are out there. And so I find people, they're like, well, I want to do mediation because I want what's fair. Fair is the F word in divorce to me. Okay. So I would rather somebody swear and use the other F word than say, I want what's fair. And when they're saying they want what's fair, they're frequently asking the mediator to become a judge. I am not a judge. I am not an arbitrator. An arbitrator is an alternative dispute resolution figure where they are making a binding decision. Mediators do not make binding decisions. Mediators are there's different types of mediation, there are different styles of mediation, but we are really just facilitating dialogue between the parties and helping the parties reach their own decision. Mediation is voluntary, and it's all about leaving the autonomy in the hands of the parties. So I cannot tell somebody if something is fair. That is very subjective. Fair is very subjective. That's why some people will say, well, what's equitable? That's still not up to me.
Yeah.
And what I love as a mediator is that my opinion doesn't matter. So sometimes people are surprised that I am asking a lot of questions of them, and I want them to come to the table with a proposal.
Yeah.
Especially that's really important in more high conflict cases where you can be kind of high conflict and it can be heated and you can still be a good fit for mediation. But it's really important that you are ready to make proposals and you know your objectives and your goals and what are you willing to compromise on. That's when you're going to be more successful in mediation. But with an attorney mediator, I enjoy what I do because I have so much experience. I've seen how so many other cases shake out, whether in court, in settlement, in mediation. I went to a lot of mediations representing a client, so being an advocate in the mediation process. And I've seen, so sometimes people will say, well, we don't know what to do with a house. And I can say, well, have you considered a deferred sale agreement?
So you have the expertise to let them know like the art of the possible rather than saying what I think could be right for you or what is fair in this situation is X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm like, hey, well, okay, we have a marital residence. We're not sure what to do with it. Your kids are 13 and 14 and they want to continue at the same high school. Do we know if the loan is assumable? I'm like, oh, I haven't asked that. I'm like, okay, before next session, let's dig into that. Yeah. Do you know this? So I ask a lot of questions and see what the possibilities are. I kind of help with that, but it's not ultimately my decision. And while I can tell people what the law is because I am an attorney mediator, it's not up to me to say what we have to do because in mediation, you are always welcome to disregard the law.
Yeah.
And a judge can't disregard the law. But parties that agree outside of court are allowed to disregard the law. And so as a mediator, it's not up to me to make sure that I prefer that parties have made, informed consent when they're entering into an agreement. But it's not up to me to make sure you understand every law that is impacted and what things could look like, best case scenario for you. And that's why the best case scenario for me is that people come to mediation and then they hire consulting attorneys to advise them as to their legal rights and obligations. And then they can choose to disregard that advice if they want to.
That's so helpful. And I am curious about what is the broader team that surrounds. One just quick question is, I've heard the term collaborative divorce. You mentioned you're part of that amicable divorce network. I've heard the term high conflict divorce. How are these things related to mediation, or are they one and the same in terms of collaborative is the same as amicable is the same as mediation, or are they different things?
So collaborative divorce requires a different training, and there are mediators that are in collaborative divorce. So collaborative divorce, I think it's really reserved for people that have, I don't want to say substantial assets, but just to have some assets because it's definitely not inexpensive. Mediation, you can mediate with just the parties and the one mediator, and that's the only cost you'll incur. In a collaborative divorce, really both sides have a team of people. So they'll have collaborative attorneys that represent each party. They may have some kind of child custody expert. Each person may have financial experts. I mean, depending on what they have, they could have this huge team. And in collaborative divorce, all of the professionals sign an agreement along with the parties that say, we will never be a part of your litigation. We are here to collaborate and work together and help you settle. And even if that means that we're going to be aggressively advocating within the collaborative process, if you choose to go to court and litigate, we are all walking away from this case.
Wow.
Meaning we are really committing to this, and this is, kind of privileged. We are really, going gung-ho on this, and people can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do collaborative divorce. Not that it always costs that much, but people are really behind it so that if you decide, you know what, I just want a judge to decide this, their attorneys have to leave the case and they have to start again with entirely new teams of people.
Wow. Okay. Super helpful. I was just like, it's collaborative. It's not high conflict, but it actually means something very specific.
It is going to be more amicable than
Yeah.
the average litigated case, but it is out of the courthouse. It is done totally differently. So you can have a mediator in a collaborative divorce. That's the one mediator, and then you have collaborative attorneys. So it's really two teams, and they can be pretty robust teams.
Yeah.
And it is a collaborative process. We're all working together. We're trying to solve a problem. And so I may do collaborative training in the long run. And I have a lot of respect for the professionals that do collaborative divorce work. It's just definitely, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and it can get expensive for that purpose because you're going to have attorneys that are $500 an hour. And then you're going to have a mediator who is $400 to $600 an hour. And then you have all these financial experts. And so those are usually going to be reserved for the cases that have more assets and more money to spend and have more complex estates.
Got it. Okay. And so then amicable, I don't know why I can't say that word. Amicable divorce network. You are a part of that. So how is that different than collaborative divorce?
Correct. The Amicable Divorce Network is a group of like-minded professionals that have been vetted by the Amicable Divorce Network. And there are attorneys who have been trained in the amicable divorce process.
Okay.
Where it's similar to, I don't want to say it, it's more similar to collaborative law, where everybody agrees that we are going to handle it a certain way and we're not going to litigate, we're not going to do certain things, we're going to work together, we're going to really work to keep this as amicable as possible. And so really it's a network of attorneys and professionals and mediators and financial experts where we're all on the same page and we all work together, refer cases to one another. But a really great group of people, but that is a different type of setting. So there are people of all stripes that are in that group, but vetted, fair billing practices, really committed to having an amicable process. And you can even enter the amicable divorce process, which is like a special type of process where the attorneys have done a training. So it's more robust in certain states. Like Tracy, the founder, founded it in Georgia. So you can actually hire people that are all part of the same network and are going to be following the same process. And people do find it's much more efficient and less expensive. And so they'll be done sooner. And a lot of people, it's just going to have a more amicable outcome. But it's also it's just a network of people. So it's an interesting group. Definitely recommend the people that are within that. And I'm proud to be part of that group.
Super helpful. So much of this is just like learning the lingo. And when you were talking earlier, I was like, I feel like a huge benefit of having a mediator is just someone who is a language translator, because even as someone who was going through the process, like relatively well-resourced and well educated, there was so much legalese and so much jargon about the process that made it really hard to sort through. And I just didn't know what I didn't know going into it. And so I really see the value that you would bring to a situation like this.
Yeah, it's super overwhelming. And so I get that. I've lived it, but I've also done this for years. And so I'm happy to help be the kind of Sherpa for people that are going through the divorce process.
The divorce Sherpa.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to us about like, who is mediation right for versus like, people in these types of situations like generally aren't successful with a mediation process.
Well, I kind of explained it where it's more the people that are willing to work together to reach an agreement, and they're entering it voluntarily. They want to keep things amicable, and they are willing to compromise, truly. Some mediators will say that the best mediated agreements are agreements where everyone's a little bit disappointed. And I don't like saying that. I mean, one of my mentors and trainers has always said the best mediated agreements in family law are whatever you can live with. And that's going to be different because some people really want to be done and they're willing to walk away from some financial things, some custody things just to be done. But if you can voluntarily work with the other person and you don't have too much baggage that you're bringing in and you can focus on the present and the future and just try to get it done, those are going to be the best couples. You have to respect the other person.
Yeah.
So truly, if you have some respect for the other person, because I have clients that will say, I'm disappointed that how he or she handled this. But at the end of the day, they're a great person. They're a great mother. I think that, he or she is really brilliant and I'm proud of them. I'm upset with how they handle this on a, emotional level, relational level, but I think they're a good person. If you can be there and work through it, that's great. That's not going to be everybody.
Yeah. And I've heard the phrase like it takes two people to get married, but only takes one person to get divorced. If one person really wants the mediation process, can you bring the other person on board and get them like warmed up to the idea? Or like, how does the process typically start with bringing you into the situation?
Yeah. So I have found, I mean, some people, if they just don't want the divorce and they're not going to participate, then you need to go through the court process and get a default judgment where the other person isn't really engaged. I do all of my mediation by Zoom, and I find that I leave space for more individual one-on-one time with the mediator and one of the spouses, where some mediators will only meet with both people together, and that's a little bit more old school. So some mediators will only do stuff in person. They'll only meet with both of the spouses. And I just find that can be challenging to get both people on board. I mean, if one person kind of runs the household and one person is always making the appointments for things and they're on top of it, usually there's going to be one person that is going to, okay, we need to get divorced. They're probably going to be the person that's suggesting the mediator. And so I will talk to somebody and they want to, find out, how much do you charge? Am I a good fit? What's your process like? And so if one person is on board and it seems like it's going well, I'll say, I call these discovery calls. I'll say, why don't you give your spouse the opportunity to have a discovery call with me? And I'll do another free call with them. And so, yeah, sure, it might be more efficient to have two people on one call. So I'm only having one call, but I know that's just not real life.
Yeah.
And these people are going through an emotional process. And so I find sometimes having separate calls is more helpful. And then actually, I've recently done a training in insight mediation, where it's a lot more about asking questions and getting to people's values and fears and kind of getting to what values are being threatened when there's when there's conflict about something. And we do long individual meetings to start the session. Yeah. Because the thing about mediation that it's wonderful is that it's privileged, meaning anything that's said in mediation cannot be introduced as admissible evidence in court. So it's protected under the California Evidence Code, and in just about every state, it is confidential and privileged. I can't testify. So if somebody says, well, they offered X, Y, or Z during the mediation, they can't rely on that in court, and they can't have me testify. I can say that's privileged. I can't testify. And so that is really helpful. It's private, so people like it. But I do these individual sessions, and they're usually about 90 minutes. And that's one of the first things I do. People are willing to change their mind once they feel heard.
Yeah. It's like the number one human thing, right? There's like, I can't show up and like pay attention to you unless I feel like I have been heard and understood first, right?
Yes, absolutely. So people, by doing these individual sessions, they're able to tell me their side of the story. And then we end up rehashing the past a lot less during the entire mediation process because they've already given me in a private setting. I'm not going to share that information with the other side, but it really informs me as a dispute resolution professional. Where's the conflict? Sometimes I'll hear somebody cheated. I'll hear that somebody felt really left behind and really hurt because they felt blindsided by the divorce or whatever. They felt the power dynamic was interesting because of finances, whatever it is. That is really helpful for me to hear about it. Even if I don't talk about it with the other side, understanding the pain points for the people that are coming in is wildly helpful. And I am building rapport with that person by meeting with them individually. So I find by doing these individual meetings and then starting joint sessions, so only after I've had these 90-minute calls with each person, then I start the joint sessions, people are so much more, I don't say malleable, but that's the word that's coming to mind, is they're just more flexible. They're more open. They feel like they've been heard and they're willing to work with me. I really, really, really enjoy it. And a lot of other mediators would never do that.
So I imagine for folks that are listening and maybe interested in exploring mediation as a path, that feels like a really good question to ask someone up front, right? Like, do you meet only in person? Or are you open to Zoom? I know when I was going through the process, I was traveling as a consultant and I was on the road 4 days a week. And so having a virtual option versus needing to be in person would be super helpful. And then also, like, do you meet with me as an individual? Do you only meet with us as a couple? I feel like those would be like really helpful questions to ask if people are interviewing different mediators, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because some people, they really want to be in person. And I found over my career, some mediators, especially more old school mediators, potentially mediators that are retired judges, they want to do everything in person and they do these marathon all day mediations that can take up to 8 hours.
Oh my God, that sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. I mean, and this is emotional. I mean, a lot
Yeah.
of litigation is emotional, even if it's civil, if someone's been injured, something like that. But this is divorce. And so just for some people, they have so much anxiety being in the same room as the other person right now.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of clients, they're so relieved to hear that it's by Zoom. And so they can see the other person, but they don't have to physically be in the same room. They can be really comfortable. They can be in pajamas. They don't have to put on makeup. They don't have to drive anywhere. And so I do about 90-minute sessions, 60 to 90-minute sessions. And we can just focus on one issue. We're just talking about spousal support today. We're just talking about child support today. And I find that people have less buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
Because when it's an 8-hour day and you've just invested in having all these experts there for all day and you're so tired, people will agree to something. Like I remember being an attorney being like, oh my God, we're here at 10 p.m. still. Let's get everybody to sign on the dotted line so nobody comes back and changes their mind. But as a mediator, changing your mind after you sleep on something is okay. And so we work together to put together like the scaffolding of an agreement. And then I draft something called a marital settlement agreement, which is ultimately a contract that's between about 10 to 40 pages, depending on the complexity of the case. And once the parties sign that, that would be an enforceable contract between the parties. Once it's submitted to the court with the right paperwork, it then becomes the divorce judgment or the divorce decree. That's what they call it in other states. But once I have that agreement, that MSA put together, I am encouraging people to take it to an attorney to have it reviewed, ask questions, make any revisions that they want to see. I don't want anybody having buyer's remorse. I want people to ask questions, make changes, talk things out, hash it out, because we're avoiding conflict later. As a conflict resolution professional, what is the value of having an agreement if people are just going to try and fight it and litigate those terms in court in a couple of weeks or a couple of months? To me, that's a failure. So I want to give people time to really hash it out and feel comfortable with the contract that they're entering.
Yeah. Can you give us a little bit of like the lay of the land here of like, what are the different steps? And I know for folks that are listening, you're an attorney mediator in California. The laws can be different state by state. I got divorced in Illinois, so things can be a little bit different. But, you know, I think there's some like scary words around like lawsuits, summons, filing, right? And then there's the things that you mentioned of like a marriage settlement agreement, divorce decree. Can you give like the 30,000 foot view for someone who's like, where do I even start? What are the steps in the process? What are all the documents? But just like the high level overview of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So at the end of the day, even if you are doing the most amicable process in every single jurisdiction in the United States, well, I mean, really, I know that the UK and Australia are very similar as well.
Okay.
And Canada, you're right, you have to open a lawsuit. Because
sounds so scary. I probably did it myself without even like realizing that's what it was. But like, it's freaking scary. Like especially in an amicable situations, like I don't want to file a lawsuit, but that's part of it, I guess, right?
Yeah. So you have to establish a lawsuit. And so you are petitioning the court to do something for you. So you are petitioning the court to dissolve your marriage. So in California, it's the petition for dissolution of marriage. And everyone's a little bit different. We have a lot of judicial council forms that are state forms. So everyone in every county in California, we all use the same forms. It's the same in a lot of states, but some states you have to actually have a pleading put together by a lawyer, or you can do it yourself and you have to submit it to the court, and it establishes jurisdiction. So then you get that paperwork back from the court. It has a case number. It's reflected as an open case now. You have to have the other person served with process, so the service of process. So usually if you have a professional come do it, that's the process server, right? They hand the papers to the other person. They say, you've been served. Most states, California included, we have a process where people don't have to be personally served. You can mail it and they will accept. We use a document called the Notice and Acknowledgement of Receipt. There's usually something similar where someone is saying, I am accepting the court's jurisdiction over me and my property.
Yeah.
And I'm going to sign this. I'm accepting service. And so in states like California, where you have a waiting period, once someone has signed that paperwork or they have been personally served, then the 6-month and 1-day waiting period will start to tick down. So now both people are under the jurisdiction of the court, and the court can make orders about property, your money, your property, your children, all the things. And so now we start that. So really there's really three main stages of the case. So that's step one. The other person in California, we call it the petitioner and the respondent. It's not even defendant. No one's defending themselves. We're a no-fault state. So we have the petitioner and the respondent. It's called different things in other places. But in a lot of cases in mediation, only the petitioner will file. So that's step one. So either one person's going to file, the responding party may file their response. It's not always necessary depending on how you are approaching your divorce process. The second step in just about every single state is going to be the financial disclosures or the financial affidavit. It's where under penalty of perjury, you are saying, here is everything I own. And if you are not sure, disclose it. You need to disclose it. People get into huge trouble in divorce because they don't disclose things, and it creates such a headache for everybody involved, and it can be very expensive, and you can lose property because you failed to disclose it. So if you're not sure, disclose it. So you disclose what you have. You disclose your income, your expenses, your assets, and your debts. And usually people are going to share their tax returns for the last couple of years. In California, it's usually the last 2 years. And that can be really helpful, better understand the marital standard of living. And that gives us the information we need to know what's out there. If we are going to calculate alimony or spousal support, what we call here, or child support, we have the information to do that. And then we can figure out what the property is that needs to be divided and allocated between the parties. And then the parties can decide how that's going to be awarded, or the court can decide how that's going to be awarded. The third stage is really the agreement stage, is where people are going to determine who gets what, how much money does one person need to pay the other, is there going to be support, if there are children involved, what's the parenting plan, and either are we going to go to trial, are we going to draft our own agreement to reflect this third stage, whatever the agreement is, or are we going to, have to litigate this? Most people are going to settle. So they're either going to settle in a out of court process, or they're going to settle at the courthouse, and they might go into the courtroom and tell the judge, okay, we just agreed to X, Y, or Z outside. They'll put it on the record, and then you're divorced. That third piece really varies depending on the state.
Okay.
So some people have to go to court. And
that's what I had.
State.
I've heard in other places that people are like, well, I didn't go to court. I just submitted the paperwork or mailed it. And I was like, what? My ex-husband and I showed up in the courthouse, even though we had a very, amicable in my mind, process and whatnot. It wasn't contentious. It was a super short amount of time, but, I had to show up in court. So it sounds like it can be very different state by state as it comes to that piece.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that, and that is why I choose to mediate in California, because I know the process, I know I know the law, and I think it's best to work with a mediator that is licensed, if possible, in your jurisdiction. And mediation is really the wild, wild west. There's a lot of life coaches that are mediators and people that are not attorneys, and I'm not saying you have to. There's some wonderful mediators that I know of that have worked really hard to learn the law and definitely know what they're doing, but in California, you don't have to have any kind of certification. You can just start mediating, and
wow.
And so
the term coach is similar. I mean, I do executive coaching as well, and it's a very unregulated space. Anybody can go hang a shingle and call themselves a coach, right? And so, that's super helpful to know what are the credentials that someone's bringing to the table.
But in different states, there are certified mediators, and certain mediators. And California is starting to do something where you have the option of registering as a mediator with the state bar. Okay. And it's kind of loosey-goosey right now. But in certain states, you have to be certified as a mediator through their superior court or something like that. And it's interesting. But I think usually, depending on where you are, you're going to want to work with somebody. You're either going to find a mediator that you like that could work in your jurisdiction, and have an attorney that is licensed in your state help you with the paperwork and guide you through the process to make sure that you are checking all the boxes and not missing any important steps.
So I want to come back to that piece because you mentioned the term consulting attorneys before. So can you lay out sort of what are the options? So there's those three phases that you just described. Should someone reach out to someone like you as a mediator, like after they've done step one, before they've done step one? And then what are the other legal professionals that people could use or often use in parallel with someone like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I always think the best approach is going to be have a solid team and figure out what you know and what you don't know. I mean, if you are a CPA in your professional world, financial stuff is probably comfortable for you. But if you have been a stay-at-home mom and you haven't worked in 20 years, then you're probably going to want some financial help. As a mediator, I actually do, because I am an attorney mediator, I do the paperwork for people. So a lot of people will come to me and they haven't filed anything, and I will file the paperwork for them. I will serve the paperwork between the parties. I will mail it and
So for
do
that,
the
like
service.
phase one, serving the papers, the petition.
So I do stages 1, 2, and 3. I help with all of that. There's never a bad time to talk to a mediator
Yeah.
before settlement. You can jump on with a mediator for an hour at a time, or you can help them with their entire process. I try to work with people from start to finish, do the paperwork. If you know you want an amicable process, I think starting with a mediator is a really good way to do it. Get your paperwork done. They can help you with the disclosures. They can help you draft the final agreement. But you can talk to attorneys and consulting attorneys at any stage. The really important thing is that when you are talking to attorneys, you want to find attorneys that are settlement minded. Because if you talk to the wrong attorney, I mean, in California, I can say this big time. If you talk to the wrong attorney and they are going to see dollar signs and they are going to say, oh my gosh, you have to go to court and I need $100,000 from you and we're going to make the other side pay. And the only people that really are going to benefit are the lawyers. But if you can find somebody early and say, hey, I'm looking for a mediation consulting attorney. I am very interested in settling my case amicably. I would love to mediate, but I do need some help reviewing paperwork, answering questions, and helping me better understand my rights. A lot of attorneys will charge you a lower retainer
Yeah.
because as a consulting attorney, it's so much less stress. You're not going to be appearing in court. You're just going to be answering questions here and there. It's a couple hours here, a couple hours there. You may review the documents. You may suggest some revisions, write some letters, but it's not as intense and there's not as much time required. And a lot of people really enjoy it. I always loved it. So I knew that I really wanted to be a mediator because I enjoyed the cases so much where I was working with people as the consulting lawyer when they were in mediation. And so ask people for that. Do you do mediation consulting when you are looking around, and find somebody who isn't going to, they will tell you, you know what, I really think that you are not going to be able to mediate this issue. It's not all or nothing with mediation. So if you have, let's say there's 10 outstanding issues, you can settle 8 of those issues in mediation and then take the only 2 remaining issues you can't agree on. Remember, you're under the court's jurisdiction. You can go to the court. You can go to the court in your county and say, you know what? We have been in mediation for 6 months. We just cannot get anywhere. Can you help us make a decision on spousal support and parenting time? And you can finish up your case in that way. Or you can do something like in California, you can do a judgment and then you can have, an agreement on reserved issues. You can reserve the court's jurisdiction over certain issues. But when you're going through the process, I think it's really good to have a team. And I frequently make referrals when I am doing my discovery calls with potential clients. I will recommend, one, it's good to understand how much money do people have. Because some people have unlimited amounts of money. And then you can hire the expensive forensic accounting firms. You can hire the top attorneys. I mean, the sky's the limit. But a lot of people don't have that. And so I will say, okay, it sounds to me you generally know what you want, but you have some questions about what a settlement would look like from a financial perspective. I am going to recommend that you talk to a certified divorce financial analyst. They're a financial expert. Their rate is usually about half the rate of a lawyer. And remember, attorneys are not trained financial advisors. So they frequently give advice that they should not be giving. And you can't rely on them. A financial advisor can tell you, they frequently know, oh, well, there's going to be tax consequences for this. This is going to be challenging for retirement. They can help you put together a spreadsheet, help you kind of put your thoughts together. Here's what support is likely to look like. here's how I would recommend you split this up. Oh, you have some stock options or restricted stock units from your husband's job. Here's how we could divide that. Here's how we could adjust things here to meet your needs. And I think that can be really, really helpful. So for a lot of people, sometimes they just have a lot of financial questions, and
Yeah.
talking with a certified divorce financial analyst or CDFA can be immensely helpful early in the process, and then can guide them throughout the process, review any proposals, make sure that everything looks okay. And then it just gives people a lot more confidence when they are entering agreements.
Super helpful. A couple final questions here as we get close to the end. One thing I'm curious about, like, what are the things that typically hold up the process, or like the most common stumbling blocks? And through those, like, what are some things that people might benefit from hearing, like, before they step into that, right? Like, you have all this experience after you've gone through the process. You're like, I wish I would have known X beforehand. What are some of those common missteps that people make through the process?
Yeah, so I definitely experienced this personally, and I think a lot of people have, where there's usually one person who is really ready to get divorced and has probably been thinking about it for a long time, and they're ready to go. They would have been divorced yesterday if they could have. And then the other person that feels quote unquote blindsided, they're not ready. They haven't fully processed it. And the person that's really driving the procedural aspect is the one who wanted to be divorced a year ago.
Yeah.
You have to let the other person circle back and kind of come around. And that might take them some time to really sit with it. It might take them some time to go to therapy. And you cannot force them. So
Yeah.
I will see sometimes one person will force the issue. They've already moved on. Maybe they've already started dating. They're ready to move on with their life. And it's really difficult. People are going to drag their heels. Either they're not going to get their financial documents together. They're not going to be as available. The conversations in mediation are not going to be as efficient or effective because they want to rehash the past, and they are just emotionally not there. So you need to give people an opportunity to come around and feel more comfortable. And so I think some people need to kind of slow their roll a little bit. And if you want an amicable process, you need to let the other person catch up, because it's just going to be too challenging. And if you're not willing to do that, then you might need to litigate, because we can't voluntarily reach an agreement out of court. So I think some people need to understand that you made this decision a long time ago, but the other person's just not ready, and give them some time. So talk to a mediator, talk to an attorney, get yourself ready, but understand that you're going to need to give the other person some time. So that's huge. The next thing is understanding what you don't know. Like I said, a lot of people don't even know you can hire consulting attorneys. They think you litigate and you hire an attorney, or you hire a mediator. You can do a blend of these things. And then know that there's other people out there. There are divorce coaches. Divorce coaches are trained to really help you manage the process, to emotionally experience the process in a better way. They can give you support that attorneys and mediators can't. And so divorce coaches are much less expensive than a divorce attorney. They can help you have a much better experience from a mental and emotional place. Speaking of that, I think a lot of people would really, really benefit from having some kind of counselor or therapist to help them through the process. And they will spend a lot less money on fees and costs. You need to have an opportunity to process what you're dealing with, whether you're the person that's leaving or the person being left, and having an unbiased person that can help you, that can support you, that can also diagnose you and say, hey, you're going through some really difficult situational stuff. I think it would be a really good idea for you to get some medication for your depression or anxiety about this, to just help. Your light's a little dim right now. Let's maybe talk to a psychiatrist to improve the situation. But you're going to drain your retainer if you're talking to an attorney and talking about emotional things that are not legal issues. You need to be talking to your attorney about facts, law, strategy, period. And if you're trying to talk about, oh, somebody hurt my feelings or something happened, that's just not the place to do it. So figure out, where are you struggling? Maybe journal, talk to your friends, do some soul searching. Where do I need additional support? If you're really anxious about the finances, talk to a CDFA. If you have tax questions, talk to a tax attorney, talk to a CPA, figure out what is really giving you a lot of anxiety and then seek assistance. If you're talking to someone like me, I am happy to give referrals and say, hey, okay, if this is what you're dealing with, here are some people that you should talk to. And I'll give usually 3 to 5 names for each type of person. I will give a list so that people can do their own research, find someone that resonates. But you need support. So having, and I think what's kind of counterintuitive is that actually having a team of more people can save you money.
Yeah. And you're getting the best expertise from everybody, right? Like what you said before about like using your lawyer for financial advice, et cetera. Like that's probably not the best use of your dollars. And you're also probably not getting the right expertise. So I think it can probably feel overwhelming and hard to think about like, oh my God, like I didn't even know there was such a thing as a certified divorce financial analyst. Like I certainly didn't know that was a thing back when I was going through the process. But first of all, understanding what are all of the resources that are out there. 2, interviewing some and figuring out who's going to be the right fit for you. Yes, it's extra work up front, but it feels like it gets you to a much better outcome in the end.
Oh, absolutely. People that feel supported and understand what they're dealing with, they are in a much better position. And we're going to get you divorced either way, but can you have a more pleasant experience? And by having a team to support you, you're more likely to have that outcome.
So I guess as listeners may be hearing today's episode, and regardless of where they are in the process, but maybe if they're in the early phases of thinking about, I think my marriage is headed for divorce and I'm contemplating mediation, what do you hope sticks with them from our conversation today?
I hope that people know that mediation, you don't have to be the ideal case. You don't have to be perfect to be ready for mediation. You don't have to come to mediation skipping, holding hands. You just have to be optimistic, respect yourself, respect the other person, and commit to having an amicable outcome. And you're going to have a much better experience. Most people are able to settle most issues. And mediation is so much more efficient. It's not as difficult on the children involved. It's not as difficult on the parties. It's not as expensive, and it's not as time consuming. And I really think a lot of people would benefit from trying mediation first before going in another direction. And so talk to a mediator. And we're not all created equal. Everyone is different. So start with mediators and really explore it before you just put down a $10,000 retainer with an expensive bulldog family law attorney. I ultimately started focusing on mediation because I wanted to be part of a solution and not part of the problem.
Yeah.
And litigation it's this cycle that people find that they get stuck in and they can't get out of it. So don't jump into the litigation boat if you don't have to. Just try to do the amicable mediation route if you can, if it's right for you. If there is abuse, if you have domestic violence in your case, if it's just a nasty case, then I'm not going to give any judgment if you are going down a different road. That's what's appropriate. And any mediator will tell you if you consult with them, you know what, I'm hearing this isn't appropriate. I wish you the best of luck. Find a trauma-informed divorce attorney.
Yeah.
But I just really hope that people realize that there are good mediators, there are good attorneys out there that are settlement-minded, that really want to help people wrap up their case as soon as possible, and just believe that you can be done and you can get through this with little trauma. And I'm happy to be here, happy to be talking about mediation. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do it.
Well, thank you so much. I really wish I knew someone like you when I was going through the process myself. So people are probably wondering where they can find you, how they can get in touch with you after listening to today's call.
So I am really active on Instagram. So you can find me at High Vibe, like high vibration, High Vibe Mediation, or highvibemediation.com. I'm also on TikTok. And then I also have my own podcast, High Vibe Divorce. So you can find me at highvibedivorce.com. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or you can also find me High Vibe Divorce on Instagram or TikTok. And I would love to see you and give me a follow.
Wonderful. Melissa, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for telling me all about the things about mediation. And I know a ton of our listeners are going to get a lot of value from today's conversation. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to The Details with Allison Kahler. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from it. New episodes drop every Tuesday.